Here we are. We've been riding out. It's now Harry's turn to swap over onto the EX20S. I mean, that's what we're reviewing here. So I'm going to hand this lovely beauty, never been crashed, never dropped, greatly loved, over to Harry. Just want to mention that.
Oh.
You get that?
Yeah.
Welcome to another video. This time we bring you the EX20S, which is a bit of a monster. Harry here and Mario had to put it on the table. Now that's the first time that's ever happened in any of the videos we've done. We've worked it out, it's about the same weight as a car. So you do need two of you to lift it and put it up. Now give us some rundown of the spec. Battery capacity is
3,600
watt hours, yeah, and the motor is
3,000.
3,000 watts.
Yeah.
Now the interesting thing is, it's a 2.75 tyre, which is fairly thin, but it's a nice knobbly tyre for the off-road. And if it's anything like the Sherman, which is a bit similar to the one that's on the Sherman, it should grip the road quite nicely as well. But I'm imagining a lot of road noise because of the knobbles on it. So it's not a street tyre on here. I really like the look of this, I must admit.
It's got like a stripped down sort of vibe, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a naked, like a naked bike, essentially. And the other thing is, you've got spiked foot plates on it. With nice, they look like brass, but they may not be. They do look like brass though. If they are, all the better, but they're honeycomb foot plates. How many lights has it got, Harry?
1, 2, 3, 4.
4 on the front.
I can't see them at the back.
Is there no rear light? Mario says it's an LED strip.
An LED strip at the back.
Where is that strip? Here, is it? Yeah. Hidden behind there?
Oh, yeah.
Very nice.
Very hidden.
Yes. Yeah, we got the trolley handle. Wow, which is very...
springy. You don't want to hit your tin on that.
No. If you got it on a table and you do that, you knock yourself out. Call it Tyson, this wheel. Right, okay. So, super heavy. As you may have seen, it's got its own stand. So, it doesn't... I mean, it's a little bit wobbly, and we're on a dead flat surface. I'll see how that goes when I do my range test, etc., and put it down on rough ground. Because some of the issues you can have with these stands, you put them on a camber. So it looks really good for photos and stuff like that. And when we're in the studio, as soon as you take it out in the real world and you put it down, it goes, whee, falls over. A gust of wind. But that, I mean, it's pretty strong. We'll see. We'll see what happens there. Suspension unit on the back, along with a mudguard. Now that's like a unicorn.
That is so handy.
It is.
Especially when you're going to be going off-road with these tyres.
But like you say, it's basically a naked machine. It's completely stripped down and already obviously comes with the side pads. So battery packs on the outside, side pads, which hopefully they're going to be the right form factor to actually work. And obviously this is also a seat, so you can sit down as well. So wheels without seats, I really miss. You haven't done any range tests yet, have you?
No.
And you understand why that is once you start riding them.
Okay.
Once you've sat down, seats are a bit of a stupid idea in terms of actually having a crash. So if you have a cut off, you're sat down, your knees are going to hit the floor first.
Yeah.
But once you get used to sitting down, when you haven't got those seats and you're riding along and you've been going for 40 minutes doing a range test, you're like, I just want to sit down. And if it's not there, you actually then miss it and you realise how much you do value a seat. But this whole thing's there. It's not actually sat on there very nicely.
No, we were wondering whether or not it could come off, like if it was a kind of optional thing, but it seems like it's not.
It's actually glued on, isn't it?
It is properly glued on,
Yeah.
which is one of those things that you could easily accidentally just strip it off.
Yeah. I think it's because there's wires going up in here, isn't it? It's sort of putting pressure on this corner.
Well, this is the other thing. So when me and Mario were lifting it up onto the table, we kind of had our hand around this section, and then at the back here, we're kind of gripping it like this. But if you have your hand to try and lift it up here, your fingers are just messing around with wires and stuff behind it. So when we say it's stripped back, like it genuinely really is, to the extent where it's kind of like...
exposed wires.
Well, there's exposed wires, how water's, tight is that? Can you take this off accidentally? Do you know what I mean? Like it's kind of like, it looks nice, but actually maybe some of the functionality might be sacrificed.
Buys an exposed fan as well there, isn't it?
I suppose you'll find out when you give it a range test.
Yeah. You've got a rear shock on the back here, which actually then runs on 2 struts. So you probably want to pick this up right now, but hopefully we'll have some B-roll of this. There's 2 struts on the inside, which is running up and down, and then you've got the suspension unit on the back as well to take the shock, and it is adjustable. So what have we got this pumped up to? I think about 320 PSI for our weight. Well, for my weight, I think Harry's probably a bit lighter. So if you do a range test on this, you're going to get more miles than me.
Cool.
Which would be actually pretty good to test.
Bring it on.
I'll do my range test. You can do your range test. And then we can just average it out between the two of us.
Nice.
So we can go, your lowest will be me. And then your average man on the street is going to be Harry, I suspect.
I probably won't be going as fast as
No, you won't be, I shouldn't think. No, but that'd be a good idea. We'll do that. We'll get us both on it and do 2 range tests. You've got a power and no USB port. 2 charge ports, which with a charger that is pushing out 3 amps, you could then charge at 6 amps with 2 standard chargers. I'm pretty sure, fairly confident, and I'll put it in the description at a later date, that you could put 10 amps into this with 2 5-amp chargers. It's a 100-volt machine. So that's the norm nowadays. Will it power on? Will it not power on? There we go. Right, so that's
the LED screen, yeah.
Yeah, let's spin that around, see if we can get that showing. There we go. Front lights, there they are. There's the front lights. And on, off. It's actually stood still. It's incredibly quiet. Sometimes you get them vibrating a little bit. This thing is pretty static. Very, very quiet. I'll be interested to see what it's like on the road. But as it is, not a lot of whine coming out or anything. Stood still. Doesn't mean a lot. It's just, yeah, just noting that because that's unusual. I suppose the back stand does create a bit of a protection for it if it falls over and stuff. Because don't forget, these are battery packs, but are encased in metal. Nonetheless, they are battery packs. But this is either going to get in the way or it's going to be really helpful. Hopefully, won't crash it. Or hopefully you won't crash it.
I'm more likely to crash it. If there's a person to crash it, it's probably me.
So, well, right, so what we'll do is we'll just take it outside on the tarmac and just have a first impressions to see what we think of it. Ride up and down a little bit. Got to pump the tyre up because it's super low. And we just get first impressions. I noticed that the alarm, when I turned it on, I can't see to turn it on and off. I wonder what that left-hand button is. I've got to work that one out. It's quite quiet. Might be because it's hidden underneath. It might just be a quiet speaker. If that's the beeping, the warning beeps, you're not going to hear that with the helmet on.
No.
So that's going to be pretty hopeless. What I tend to do, a little tip, is in the app, I set tilt back function at a speed that I want it to be my maximum. And that way you get a physical response from the machine rather than waiting for just an alarm. Some people turn off all the tilt backs and then ride it to the alarm. You've got a massive risk there. Full head helmet, wind in your face, can't hear a thing, and you're reliant on the beeps. You're going to have a shut off. So I set the tilt back. But there we go. Let's use an engine hoist to lift it down, and we'll see you outside, won't we, where you're going to try it. Do you want to be the first one trying it? Or
No, you go.
go first before it gets broken.
Yeah, exactly.
Try it first.
Yeah.
I do like this metal look along here. I wonder what happens when that gets rain on it. Presumably it's stainless steel. So you've got aluminium. It looks like Ali. It might not be. Could be stainless steel. We'll see. This is why we do these range test videos and 1,000 kilometres, is to see what happens over those times. See what rusts, what doesn't, what falls off, what doesn't, what breaks. We'll see you outside in a second. It's not bottoming out, is it? Well, okay, that clears. That clears. So holding it like that is really easy. It's actually pushing backwards. So if you keep a bit of pressure on there and then hold that front light unit.
Yeah.
Front light unit, that's it.
Yeah.
Because if you hold this like we mentioned inside, it's going to rip that off.
Yeah.
So just push down. Just push down on the back. That's
Yeah, fine.
Yeah, you're making it do all the work.
It's not really a problem at all, is it?
And then car weight. Easy. Easy. Whilst we can ride together slightly, but you can go on this one. Nice little shot. Here we go, going out for the first time on the EX20S. Give it a go. It feels rather large. Nice and bouncy. Right, let's try reverse, Mario. Oh, yeah, it does. It reverses. What's the curve feel like? Oh, lovely and soft. That's lovely and spongy and soft. You can hardly feel, going back up that curve, you can hardly feel it. It's really soft. Oh. You can feel the weight of the machine, but I mean it took the impact anyway, so took a little bit of body rotation to actually take the impact, but I haven't broken my legs and I haven't broken the wheel. So bearing in mind, he's basically ridden the Ninebot 1E 16-inch knittle wheel the most, and the M Super Pro. This is a bit of a different ballpark. The properly new rider going on. Let's have a sit down and see what it's like. Oh wow, that's low. That's a lot lower to sit than that one. Really, really comfortable. As always, with the seats, braking is quite slow. So as long as you don't go too flat out and you give yourself like 100 metres braking distance, you'll be fine. As long as no one drives out in front of you, you're better off standing up to brake on this one. It's a lovely, comfortable, long seat. The disadvantage is you've got nowhere to brake, nothing to sort of push back on. So you almost need to just jump up. Anyway, don't be sitting when it's real busy. Really nice.
This seat as well, it's just,
Yeah.
you can just sit on it.
Yeah.
Like it's,
This
we sound silly, but like it is a seat.
Yeah.
It's like a proper seat.
It's not that silly because this one says it's a seat and it kind of isn't.
No, that's
but
like
it
a
is.
stool.
But it isn't. We are out in the Forest of Dean to try out the EX20S, and continuing on, this is the sacrificial wheel, which is the S20. Harry's going to go on the S20 whilst we step out on this as well, and then we're going to do a bit of swapping around. So Harry's coming up from a smaller wheel to a slightly bigger wheel to see what that's like, and then he's going to take that jump to this one once he's got sort of on with that and got on well with it. So we're going to see how that goes. And Harry's all geared up, aren't you?
Yeah.
He's ready to go.
Got my pads.
Bulletproof. So he's going to go out on the trails and see how it goes.
Oh.
Here we are. We've been riding out. It's now Harry's turn to swap over onto the EX20S. I mean, that's what we're reviewing here. So I'm going to hand this lovely beauty, never been crashed, never dropped, greatly loved, over to Harry. Just wanted to mention that. There you are.
Great confidence you got in you.
Yeah, there you go. Cheers. That's that. Lovely. I'll get this tiny little wheel.
Oh, it's so comfortable.
Oh.
You get that?
Yeah.
Oh. Did you see that?
Yeah.
I literally, it's like a jump. I think I got some air on that. Oh. Hey everyone, we are back in the studio having gone out in the woods with this wheel. Ian is actually still off making another video, but I've got back to give you some thoughts about how I found the Begode EX20S. Now today was actually my first time riding a wheel with suspension, and originally that wheel was the Kingsong S22, and I found it really great being able to go around those holes and over the roots and the twigs and stuff like that without really feeling that bump and without kind of it knocking you off balance. So then moving from that wheel onto this one, I found that this suspension was actually a lot more substantial. It felt like I could take even deeper holes. It felt like I could go over even larger kind of roots and sticks and stones and things, and not actually have that affect my riding too much, which is a really great actually. It felt like this is a very kind of comfortable wheel to be riding with. The only downside I would say of that is that because of that suspension system and because of the higher and larger number of batteries, this is a larger wheel. It's just bigger more generally, but also you're standing much higher up off the ground, which means that it's much harder to move it around. The maneuverability is a lot less. And one of the ways that expresses itself is if you're trying to make sharp corners, if you're trying to make kind of sudden turns, if you're trying to dodge something that's come out. There was one point a kind of pigeon, I think, flew out next to us. If you've got to try and avoid that sort of thing, this is just not able to make those quick turns because it's so big, because it's so hefty, which I suppose is a bit of a downside. I suppose another aspect of that is because it's so big, it's quite tiring actually to use, especially if you're doing stuff that takes a lot of kind of getting on and getting off, pushing off and kind of stopping and starting your ride. What you'll end up feeling like is you're just tired because every time you get on, you have to overcompensate to kind of properly push off because it's so heavy. And it meant that every time I started, it took me a little while, a fair few wobbles, whilst I was trying to write it, just because of that extra heaviness that was kind of pulling it off center a little bit. But like I said, it's still comfortable. It's just slightly hard to maneuver and slightly more tiring to use. Now, I suppose another instant feature that you can tell from this wheel is that, yeah, it's just stripped down. It's not got any of the decorative pieces or whatever. It's literally just the steel frame or the aluminium frame, the batteries, the wheel, and the pads. And that gives it quite a cool look. But what I have found is it doesn't quite work practically when you're trying to use it. So one of the examples I found is when you're suddenly going and you need to quickly get off, or you need to quickly stop, as I did a few moments. You kind of get, take your foot off and you're on the floor and you're trying to hold it in place, but there's actually nothing to hold it by other than this foam pad, which means that it feels like it could easily rip it off. And actually there was one moment, unfortunately, where I had to quickly get off, probably because of my poor riding skills, and it felt like I could feel or hear something in this section kind of tearing, as if some of the glue was coming off or something like that. Which I suppose is something that you wouldn't have with a wheel that's a little bit kind of more fleshed out in terms of its kind of decorativeness, or its a handle at the front or something like that. Now, I suppose aside from that criticism, I think the aesthetic's really nice. I actually really like the way that it looks, the kind of black and silver approach, and some of the exposed wiring and things as well. And these lights are very powerful, they're very strong and bright. I suppose an additional thing is that with this wheel, the foot pedals here, they've got this metal studs on them, which means that your foot's very grippy. You can really stick on really well, and once your foot's on there, you're not going to slip and stuff. But I suppose for me, at least, the downside was, as someone who hasn't got a lot of experience getting on and off these sorts of wheels, I often don't, with my left foot, put it in the right place that it should be. And sometimes after setting off, I need to adjust that a little bit. But with these grips, you actually can't do that because they're holding your foot so much in that position or that place. So it's just a little bit harder to adjust your footing once you're moving, which often meant that I would kind of get on and just get off straight away, because I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to keep going with this. My foot's just completely in the wrong place and it's not going to be able to be moved. So aside from that, these foot pedals are really strong, and the little studs mean that, like I say, your foot won't move, which is obviously a big advantage if you're going up and down steep hills. You're moving around quite quickly. You just won't fall off or slip off or whatever, which is obviously a big win. So for me, those are the kind of main things that I noticed just straight off the bat, using it as a beginner. And it is a good wheel. You feel like you're riding something that's really high quality. But like I said, some of those minor issues I had with it meant that I probably preferred to use the Kingsong that I started off riding with in the first place. So there we go. Those are my thoughts about this wheel. And we're going to turn over now to see how Ian has found it, having done a little bit more riding, and he's going to come with some expert feedback about this wheel.
Well, I have been out on the EX20S now and done the range test, and as such have quite a good feel for how this wheel performs. Has to be said, it is heavy, and you do notice that 47 kilograms is quite a weight, and you find if you're off center slightly, you can really feel that weight pushing you over, which is an unusual experience. But of course, it's all about getting used to and handling a brand new wheel. That's part of that. There's an advantage to it which makes it very, very planted when it's on the road and off-road. So there is an advantage and there is a disadvantage. If you start going off because you're going to fall off, you've got a lot of weight to pull back, a bit like a big motorbike. If you've got a little 125 or something and you lean it over, you can pick it back up again. If you get on a huge beast of a machine and it leans over it, you've got a lot more effort to pick it back up again. It's kind of like that, but obviously on a smaller scale. But you do feel it nonetheless. But as I say, it is more planted that way, so you can go through stuff that other wheels would be a bit jittery on, a bit slippy and slidey. So of course, one of the main features of this thing, the standout features, is the seat. The seat is incredible. It is actually like a seat. We've been calling them seats for ages, but I've come off the S20, S22 now, as it's now known, onto this. Now, it's odd because this wheel's bigger, but you have to sit down a little bit lower to actually access that seat. It's a bit strange. Again, conditioning for the wheel. Once you sit on it though, it is like, it's just like a seat. It doesn't hurt at all. It's lovely and soft and comfortable, even over the bumps. Of course, aided by the suspension, which I'll come on to in a bit, but it makes a massive difference. So that seat is just lovely. Wherever you sit on it, it's just not uncomfortable. Disadvantages I've mentioned many times before. Of course, your accelerating and your braking are severely sort of reduced. So the speed of your acceleration, you can throw your whole body weight forward and lean right forward, and you're going to accelerate, but nowhere near as fast as when you've got all that leverage when you're stood up on it. And likewise for the braking. So from that point of view, you do need to be wary. Sit down when you're on your own or just riding with someone. Don't do it in really, really busy streets and traffic and stuff like that, because if someone jumps out in front of you, you're probably not going to stop. With the added disadvantages is actually really heavy wheel. It's not a light wheel, so if this hits someone at any speed, it's going to do some damage, isn't it? So yeah, I wouldn't recommend sitting and riding in really, really busy traffic. One of the things to say is that I noticed that you don't get any rattle from the trolley handle because it's pushed into a lovely soft seat, so you don't get that rattle. But it does have splitting already, and at the time we're talking 80 kilometers in, so that's when I noticed it. A little bit of splitting where it pushes down, it sits on that seat, it's actually split. So like, okay, don't think it's going to make a massive difference. It's just annoying because that split is going to work its way out to the outside, but it's actually fixed here and here. This part here in the middle is going to decay by the looks of it over time, but it's not integral to the actual seat itself. It's just that shouldn't really split, would it? And it's because they brought the material down really thin in that center area to allow that trolley handle to come down. It would almost be better if they built something different than that, or cut it out. They could probably cut it out to stop the split moving on. But of course then you might get a rattle on the trolley handle. So I've noticed that, that's for sure. When you're actually sat down, I did have a little incident because, as I say, I come off the S20, 22 to this. Doing a corner I always do. Done it many times, sat down on the S20, go round it, out in the forest trails, and it just turns. This thing, sat on it, went to turn, I was like, it's not turning. And then it started to lean over slightly, got a bit of a wobble on, I was like, oh, whoa, and I actually just managed to keep the thing upright. I thought, I'm not dropping this, it's its first ride out. And I thought, can't drop it. So I held on to it, managed not to crash, but its turning capabilities when you're sat down is slower again, just like when you sat down braking and accelerating. The turning side of it is a bit more difficult. At higher speeds, you can sit in a dead straight line. At a lot slower speeds, you have to be very fidgety, keep moving your core to get the thing to track straight. So sitting down in really slow speeds, not ideal, but at more speed, like 10 miles an hour and up, it's not really a problem. But the turning, I did notice the difference between coming off another seated wheel to this, actually slower response time, which I say slower response time, it's conditioning again. So you have to put more effort in to get it turned quicker. But I put the same effort in as I did with the S20 and got a lot slower response. So what I've learned since then is just put more effort in to get the thing to turn. So just a little bit more effort with seated riding. With this tyre, I was saying about the weight of the machine itself bearing down. This tyre, as expected, has performed really, really well. Nice and noisy on the road. I say nice and noisy. I like the sound. Sounds like it's trundling down like a tank, a bit like the Sherman when I first took that out with a tyre like this on it. Really nice. And I've not had any slipping or anything off-road. It is summer, but there are damp patches around that we've been hitting, and it's not shifted or anything like that at all. It's handled it perfectly fine. So we've got loads of traction off-road. We've got traction on-road. I say noisy on tarmac. Beautiful off-road. No issues whatsoever. The lights that run across the front here. You've got 4 lights. I mean, one bright one would have done, but you've got 4 nonetheless. Nice and bright. And what more can I say? They're not adjustable per se, but you can probably make out you've got a little bit of a basically 2 bolts here holding this on. I would imagine with just a couple of holes drilled, you could actually make an adjuster for this or a little channel built so you could loosen it off and move it if you wanted to. I didn't really have any issues with it, but the lack of adjustability, ease of adjustability, could be a concern if you wanted to adjust your headlights more, but otherwise they've worked fine. Turning them on, you use the power button, press it again, they'll start flashing, press it again, they turn off. No auto sensor, so they don't come on automatically. So it's a manual turning on of those lights. Sitting down doesn't affect the switches, so I haven't turned the lights on accidentally. When you're sat on it, you're clear of it. Lifting the machine is a little bit awkward, as you can imagine. So you can't really lift it with center trolley handle. It's not designed to take this whole weight. You can, but I wouldn't recommend it. So you kind of ended up lifting it here, but behind here is a load of electronics for the lights. But you have to sort of lift it here and on the back, which is pretty strong. This back piece is metal, but it's a lot of weight. No automatic shut off or anything like that for the tyre spinning up. Lifting it is just clunky and heavy, as you'd expect, and you can't really just cart the thing around easily, lobbing it back and forward. So it is what it is. It's a wheel for riding. So it's a bit like the Sherman in that regard. You mean, you're talking same battery power as a Sherman Max, 3,600 watt hours. That heaviness, but with the Sherman, what they've done is got the roll cage, so you can actually grab front and back and just pick it up, even though it's heavy. This is a little bit more like, where do you grab it? So nothing really designed to be picking it up. They obviously didn't have that design in mind to be carrying it around because they knew it was going to be so heavy. So, you know, it's for getting on and riding it, really. I've had it with little things like outside our house, we're having the pipe put in, water pipe, and there's a channel dug, and it's about this wide, and you just there you want to go, but to pick it up, to get it over there, you sort of can't. You have to fold up the foot plates, turn it off, pick it up, put it on your knee, and then throw the thing over like that, and then hold it, power it back up again, let it stabilise, and then sort of jump over. That whole process was a bit like, because there's no way of going around because the channel's dug completely all the way along. With that channel, I found that's where I really had a bit of a problem with it. Otherwise, not really a major issue. If you come down across a fallen tree and stuff, you can usually leave it powered up and just sort of let the thing roll up and over the tree and over. So in those instances, it's when you actually have to pick it up. So if you were trying to pick it up and put it on a bus or a train or something, you had to go up something, you were going to notice it then. If you're going up steps, you can use the wheel itself and you push it back to front, whatever, and push it up. As long as it's not wet, it won't spin up, or shouldn't, if you're doing it right. So there are ways around it. It's just cumbersome is what I'm trying to say, because it's so heavy. Now, of course, with that heaviness, you get the battery for the range. So you get 3,600 watt hours. Now, no one's going to be surprised at this. Did I get 100 miles out of this machine? No. I got 50 miles out of this machine, from a full to empty, and to really to empty. So I ran it down to where it couldn't be ridden anymore. And we are basically in summertime, so it was in about, I think it was about 20 degrees, something like that. So pretty much optimum. So that's going to be the worst case scenario. As always, there will be people out there that got 100 miles out of this machine. This was tested to the maximum. This is the minimum range you're going to get. We always do that because you can go on all day almost. What's the maximum range you can get out of a wheel? Well, if you go 5 miles an hour and you weigh 60 kilograms, you're going to get a huge amount of mileage out of it. If you pump the tire up a little bit harder, you don't go off road and you only ride on flat and you're riding in 25 degrees C and there's no wind. You know, all those sorts of factors take part in range tests. So we've always, since 2014, gone out and got the minimum that you're going to get. Report back the minimum. You're only going to be pleasantly surprised when you get one and then you jump on it. So I got 50 out of it. I was a little bit disappointed because I was thinking, well, should be able to get about, I was guessing 60 or 70 miles out of the machine, but it's 50 and that's what it is. That's not on flat. It's totally mixed riding. It's real life range, flat out, essentially pushing it to the maximum. A little scratch on there, I think it is. A little scratch on the light lens. There we go. Okay. This is tilting me right back. And that brings me on to the alarm. So the alarm on this, when we unboxed it, I was talking about the fact that this is buried in here quite deep, this alarm, within this housing, this seat. When you sit down on it, it's probably going to cause it to be muffled completely. Now, both those, I found I could hear it. So stood up, full head helmet on, doing that range test, pushing this to the hardest I could, and off-road with the gravel sounds and stuff that are travelling up and the feedback you hear from and that sort of stuff, I could hear the alarm beeping. So it was fine. Did find when you threw in traffic noise at the same time, so you got the tyre noise on the road, but a load of traffic going by, lorries and stuff, it was more difficult to hear. So it isn't the loudest alarm I've ever heard before. Now, I would always advise that you set the tilt back so you've got a physical response rather than just relying on alarm. For instance, that alarm could fail. And if you're not used to traveling on wheels and sort of guessing speed from things around you, cues from around you, like the speed of hedges going past you or things you're passing, stationary objects, and trying to guess from wind in your face and all this sort of business, if you're not quite au fait with that, relying on an alarm is never a good idea. Having a physical feedback of the foot plates tilting back slightly, you're going to know then, I'm near my limit. So I'd always advise you go into the app and you just set that at a speed you're happy to go up to. If you had an off, what speed are you willing to crash at? Set it at that. But when I try to do this on the app, you set it, it says set, but it doesn't set it. And when you go back in, it still doesn't set it. So I couldn't set the alarms and I couldn't set the tilt back. So my app, when I log into this, says all alarms off. So what that means, I'm not going into too much detail about that, but basically it will start beeping at about the 80% mark of power output. That's the alarm that was coming in for me when I was near the upper power, but there was no tilt back of the foot plate, so I couldn't set it. So I was a little bit wary, but I took it, I went through a little speed thing they put up there, and it was 30 on the road, and it was showing 32. So I was up near the maximum and it was beeping it at that. So, which varies depending on if you're going uphill, on the flat, etc. But anyway, I couldn't get the tilt back to work. It should work. They should be able to have tilt back on it. Couldn't get it to work. But this is the first video we've done on it, so perhaps that will change. Moving on to the foot plates. The foot plates, oh boy, are they lovely. I mean, they're honeycomb ones. And as I said many a time, when we've done the footage of going through water, it comes up in and you get soaking wet socks if you've got trainers on. So apart from that bit, I'm used to having a completely covered and you can go through puddles and you don't get any water on your shoes. But anyway, that aside, super grippy. Not once have I slipped off these things. Lovely and long foot plates. Lovely and long, perfect width on them. Loads of spikes already in them. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. They open and close like butter. No snagging, no catching. You just open like that. Really nice. Really, really like them. Not got a bad thing to say about those at all. These side pads, epic. Absolutely epic. You may have seen in other videos, they have other pads along the bottom. They weren't included with ours. Didn't miss them, to be honest. So, not particularly completely crazy about side pads. What it does do, of course, is it allows you to garner more power from your wheel. So if you want extra torque out of the box, you need to have pads. Now these come with pads. These are pre-fitted onto this machine. Lovely. Really good for braking, really good for accelerating. I think actually in comparison to the S20 side pads, I prefer these. They got a bit more to them, a bit more protrusion from them. One thing I did find is with really tight corners, again with the weight of this machine, really tight corners, when you're leaning into the pads trying to accelerate, to turn tightly, you actually need to sort of remove your leg out of that pad and lean in, so lean the wheel in. And the only way you can do that is by sort of removing your leg. That's real tight technical turns. So that's, again, is a bit more cumbersome. But really, this thing is all directed at those that are just going to get on the road and go and go and go and go and not be doing tight turns in complex trails. It's not designed for complex, tight turning trails at slow speeds. It's just not what it's for. Can you do it? Yes, you can. It's the same with any of these wheels. When I reviewed these wheels, you can more or less do anything on any wheel, ground clearance permitting and power of the motor output permitting. You can pretty much do anything. It's just more effort. So can you ride this around tight track? You can. It's just a lot of effort and you're going to be sweating trying to get it to do it. There are other wheels that are more suitable. The mudguard has worked really, really well. So the mudguard on here, if I can just pick this up now. Noisy. Perfect. Thank you for putting a mudguard on. Could it do with a mudguard here? I think so. So this is not ridden in rain because it's nice and sunny, but we've got dust residue here and here, which makes me think when it's all muddy and raining, you're going to get it all up in here. And of course, these are grooved. So cleaning is going to be a right pain in the ass, but there we go. So really, I'd like to see a mudguard come across the front here. That would be quite nice. Hasn't got it. Got the back one. At least you're not getting stuff sprayed all up your back all the time. So massive bonus for having that. That's for sure. One thing I did get at 80 kilometers was squeaky suspension. Now, I don't think I'm going to be able to load it enough for you to hear it. I don't think. Let's try it. No, it's not going to work because all you can hear is the tyre squeaking against the table. But anyway, it's not that loud. But there is a squeak, slight squeak. It wasn't as bad today when I took it out, but yeah, so I think that might need more oil. and it's usually just a simple case of that. But 80 kilometers in, wasn't really expecting that. It's more of a niggle. The S20, you sort of get those bits of noises from all the movement, because obviously a lot of moving components. It's always been my concern really with maintenance, with the machines that have got multiple links within that suspension. Is the more links you have, the more likely to have fail points within them, more places for dirt ingress to get in and start wearing things away. Where when you haven't got suspension, you just sat on an axle and you've got a bearing, or two bearings technically, I suppose. So yeah, from that point of view, bit annoying noise, but not all the time either. I was pleasantly surprised when I took it out today. I was like, oh, can't really hear it unless I was really loading the suspension. Couldn't really hear it. So just noting that, and we'll see how it develops over the 1,000 kilometers, because obviously that's why we do these tests, to see what actually happens. Is it going to get worse, or is it just going to go away and it's just bedding itself in? We don't know until we get to the 1,000 kilometers. Then I'll be able to report back during that time. The stand at the back down here hasn't got in the way of any drops or anything, or climbs. That stand there has not hit anything, no issues whatsoever. Whilst turning through stiles, etc., gates, small gates, and off drops, has not hit anything. The rubber mounts at the bottom make it nice and soft when you put it down. It's not metal on concrete, for example. Is it good on a camber? Nope, didn't expect it to be. I mean, it's all right on flat or a slight slope, but anything, you know, if it's off-roady and not flat and on a slope, it's just going to fall over. So if it's in your living room or something like that in your garage, it's going to be fine. But it's built in and you don't have to buy a stand. That's great. If you want a stand, click up here to see the Pro stand on our website. I've taken a few notes down in terms of who is this wheel for, who is it aimed at. Firstly, and most importantly, it's for the long distance rider, someone that's going to be out all the time on those straight roads, just riding. Or someone perhaps can't get a charge. So if you're traveling to and from work 5 days a week, this is going to take you, if you're a short distance rider, but use it all week and can't get a charge, for example, it's going to be able to hold enough power for you to do those short journeys multiple times. Or for someone that just sits on it and says, right, I'm riding for 2 hours and I'm going this way, and then 2 hours back, whatever, that's who it's designed for, is someone that's going to stand on it and just ride. Also, someone that does a high proportion of seated riding. So if you're doing seated riding a lot, I haven't sat on anything more comfortable. There's no unicycle I've actually sat on that's as comfortable as this. So if you're in it for more seated riding than standing riding, then I present to you the EX20S with a lovely seat. And then thirdly, which brings me on to the suspension, someone who just wants a comfortable ride, like you're on a magic carpet, and or someone like me, maybe lower back issues, which I don't actually have much of anymore, and that's probably because I've been riding the S20 as my go-to wheel, because that's all we got, because we've been waiting for this stuff to come in. Suddenly realised that I haven't been saying, oh, my back, for quite a few months. And it's the same with this one. This is a step softer. And you can change the suspension settings, but it's softer than the S20. It is really, really comfortable. It's really nice. So if you're someone that does actually have back issues, it would stop you riding otherwise, because it antagonises it. This may be the answer with its suspension setup. It's just lovely suspension. Just such a lovely ride. It really is. You can go out, you don't feel anything at all. It's like, oh, lovely. Especially if you've been riding across stuff regularly, you're thinking that's real bumpy. And when you hit it on this, you're expecting it. And you're like, oh, wow, barely noticed it. So if you're looking for that comfort for health reasons, or just because you want a comfortable wheel, it's just so lovely and soft and comfortable. Two big struts down there, and that suspension unit on the back. It's really well proportioned in terms of the way it handles those bumps. And the other thing, of course, it's got no screen on here. Now, we briefly talked about speed and the alarm. You've got no screen, which can be a benefit because it's one less thing to go wrong. But of course, you can't quickly look down and go, ah, that's how fast I'm going. You can't make any adjustments from it either. You've got the buttons here. You've got the power button, and then you've got another button to the side, which is, if you press twice, then disables the motor, and actually then you can put it on the stand whilst it's on, and it beeps at you a couple of times and then shuts up, but it's on. When you pick it back up to center point, it goes, I'm on now, and it turns back on again and stabilizes. So that's great if you're stopping to check a map or you're stopping to do something else. You can just press it twice, plonk it down, wait, and just pick it up and get straight back on it and go without powering it off and on. So this wheel so far is really nice, and just like I've really enjoyed riding the S20 to date, this is going to be another one of those machines. And for me specifically, I really like going out and doing long rides. It's just great not having to worry, so I can go, I'll go 20 miles that way, and I can come 20 miles back. This isn't an issue. I'm sort of get frustrated when I'm limited to a 25-mile range. I can't go 20 miles that way because I'm going to be stuffed. So you can then only go sort of 10 miles one way and 10 miles back. So something like this really opens up all the trails for me without having to worry too much about charging. The dual charge ports, use that to charge it up to go out today. So I've got the 5 amp on it from the Sherman and a 3 amp and charged it up like that. So that worked fine. The 2 charge ports. There you go. What we will do is come back, and it won't take very long obviously, for the 250 kilometer review, and then we do the 650 and then we do the 1000. Comment below if you've got any questions or something you want us to include next time in the 250. Hurry up because it won't be long, and we'll try and include it. I'll try and go away and get it in there for you or answer it, or even answer just in the comment section for you. But we'll run this up as all wheels up to 1000 and just report back. I'm going to let you know, does this start to rust? Do you get dust on here? Does this get dirtier? I'm not going to wash it. So we'll see how dirty it gets, if it does at all. But so far I am absolutely loving it. Heavy and not for everybody, as I've outlined, but in terms of comfort and ride and range and power, right up my street. So I will see you on the next one.